In this video, I'm going to talk about the importance of doing self-assessment and reflection of our past and our current life. It is through digging deeper into our past that God shows us where our identity was misplaced. And intimacy with Jesus is key, for He shows us our true selves in order to glorify Him ultimately. Isaiah 49, 2-3 talks about this. He made my mouth like a sharpened sword, and in the shadow of His hand He hid me. He made me into a polished arrow, concealed me in His quiver, and He said to me, "You are my servant Israel, in whom I will display my splendor." The point is to understand the pain in our lives and the awareness of the trauma that is creating these lies that we carry. See, what happens is this is what gets in the way of us seeing and experiencing Jesus in ultimate truth. Everyone is under some type of exterior influence. It's just that who are you giving your authority to? When you give authority to God, what comes from that is peace, joy, and strategic direction, even if it's just one step at a time. When you give your authority to others, now that comes with confusion. It can come with codependency, performance, fear of man, people-pleasing, anxiety, and also striving as well. Thankfully though, the Holy Spirit is our ultimate guide. And He reveals, as you dig deeper into your story, who you have been giving authority to. I'd love to share a personal story now. I was living in New York City, and I was very individualistic, had a transactional mindset, and very self-focused. I ended up carrying a lot of anger and anxiety, but I wasn't exactly sure where it was coming from because I was doing everything right. I just chalked it up to maybe working in a fast-paced fashion environment. I also had a very religious mind as well, but a lack of intimacy with Jesus and little reflection of my past story. So one night, I ended up going to this dinner party in New York City, and I was sitting around the table, and I noticed it was these men and women that were incredibly successful. They had worked really hard to create these careers and networks that anyone would dream of. But I noticed though, as I was listening to them talk, that they were very unhappy and they just seemed downright unfulfilled in their life. It was that night when I went home, I heard God speak so clearly to me. He asked me, "Adelaide, do you want this life?" And in that moment, I said, "No, I actually don't want that. I want to be fulfilled." It was then very shortly after that God actually asked me to leave my perspective in New York and then to move to be with family in Texas. There I learned what intimacy with Jesus really looked like for the first time. And I found that my authority was not in Jesus, but actually it was self-performance. And this needed to change. See, I had always had to strive to prove to myself and others that I was good enough. Now, thankfully, in Texas, God ended up leading me directly into a 12-step program that led to deeper reflection of my past trauma and also led to a lot of self-discovery. I have found that many times the Holy Spirit only asks me to be patient with myself in the process. For the Holy Spirit is the one who does all the heavy lifting and all the healing work. All I have to do is hold still and take note of trading my perspective in for His perspective. Pete Scazzero mentions Thomas Keating, who compares God's work in us to a Middle Eastern archaeological site. The Holy Spirit, he says, is like a divine archaeologist digging through the deepest layers of our lives. Scazzero shares that the Holy Spirit throws out the junk and preserves the values that were appropriate to each stage of our human development. He shared that we find it is actually God that is doing the digging all along. He is the one that is bringing up our trauma from the past. Now, my prayer for you is that you are encouraged to begin your assessment and reflection process and have great confidence and faith that if you hand over the reins to Him and are faithful in your process, the Holy Spirit will do all the heavy lifting. If He brings it up, He will be the one to carry you through and give you complete healing to become the person that He designed you to be.